Hey there, this is Natalie, and this is another theory type video about ReZero. If you watched my last one of these, which was all about whether Subaru will gain an authority of gluttony, and if so, what it might do, then I did mention something about another theory involving Ram in there, and that's what this quicker video is going to be about. A nice crackpot Ram theory. Before I get started, if you like ReZero theories, some of them weird, some of them not so weird, or you like analysis and general coverage of the ReZero anime and source material, then please consider subscribing to my channel. I make several new ReZero videos every week, as well as similar content for Attack on Titan and various other anime, and I really need the love. So if you like this kind of stuff, have a click on the subscribe button down below, and also ring the bell to be notified when I upload new stuff. As well as all that YouTuber stuff, I also have to warn you that the Ram theory I'll be talking about relates to something that happens in Arc 6, so there will be spoilers. Though, as I usually do in these videos, I'll keep them to only what you need to know for the theory, and I will explain the background. So if you're anime only or not caught up with Arc 6, and you want to watch it anyway, you should still be able to follow the idea. And with that out of the way, let's get on with discussing, could Ram get an authority? So, there are a few reasons why I think there's the potential there for Ram to obtain an authority of gluttony. This could be instead of Subaru obtaining one, or as well as Subaru. There are 3 archbishops of gluttony after all, so it could be possible for more than one person to have the witch factor at a time. We don't really know what the rules are when it comes to witch factors being passed on. We know that Subaru gained the witch factors of sloth and greed when Betelgeuse and Regulus were killed, so killing a Sin Archbishop is certainly one way for them to be passed on, but the passing on of a witch factor doesn't seem to happen automatically or indiscriminately to the person who does the killing. When Subaru told Beatrice that Betelgeuse was dead and that he'd killed him, she asked what had happened to his witch factor, something Subaru didn't know anything about at the time, as it was before he'd learned about witch factors or that he'd gained sloths. It seems the witch factors are somewhat selective when passed on this way, otherwise Betty, who has a lot of knowledge about this stuff, after spending 400 years in a library full of echidna's books, wouldn't have asked that question. She would have been able to assume Subaru now had the sloth factor, and what she said would have been very different. We also know from the way Betelgeuse consumed the sloth witch factor in the first place, as shown in Emilia's Trial of the Past, that witch factors can be kept outside of anybody, and consumed as a way of passing them on. It's quite possible that this is how some or all of the Sin Archbishops were created, by somebody, probably Pandora, giving witch factors to specifically chosen people. But the other way we know of a witch factor being given to someone is if the holder of it willingly puts a part of it inside somebody else. This is probably how Satella gave Subaru Return by Death, but it's definitely something Louis Arneb, the 3rd Sin Archbishop of Gluttony, did in Arc 6. Louise split her witch factor into 2 and put one half inside Subaru, before eating his memories out from the inside and discarding them. By doing this, she created Amnesia Subaru, who she then kind of rode along inside as a passenger, experiencing what happened to him next, including a whole lot of death. There is quite a lot to what happened with Louis there, and what she's trying to achieve, and all of that's kind of out of the scope of this video since I want to get onto the Ram theory, but what this does tell us is that someone who holds the witch factor can split it and pass it on willingly, so it's definitely possible for more than one person to have it. In some translations, witch factors are translated instead to witch genes, and it seems like that's kind of how we can view them. They may be rare, but they're not like unique magical items that only one person can use at a time, and that you can only obtain by killing the previous owner. It seems like someone who holds one and is knowledgeable about what it can do things like split it or copy it or implant it somewhere, and so on. I'm just saying all of this because otherwise it may seem like if the following theory were to be true and Ram were to get the authority of gluttony, then that would mean that Subaru couldn't also get it unless he killed Ram. It does seem likely that Subaru is supposed to end up with all of the witch factors by the end in order to become a sage. So that either means this theory would stop all of those sage theories from working, or Subaru would potentially have to kill Ram at some point, and neither of those sounds particularly awesome. Instead, what I'm suggesting here is that Ram may get the witch factor from Batenkaitos, who she killed at the end of Arc 6, but Subaru could still potentially get a witch factor of his own by some means from Arneb, whether by her giving it to him again, or by killing her. We don't really know yet whether Tappei is going to give Louis death or redemption. Or, alternatively, Ram would be the only one to gain the authority, but she could perhaps willingly share it in some way with Subaru where needed, perhaps via some evolution of Corleonis. I'm really just spitballing on the Subaru stuff there, but the point is, the Ram gluttony theory doesn't override any other possibilities where Subaru needs to get the witch factor. So, as I said, Ram did kill a Sin Archbishop, and pretty much on her own. She got some help from Subaru's Corleonis ability, which allowed her to fight past her usual limits, and from Rem, whose horn she was able to partially use due to an ability the twins share called synesthesia, and Patrash kinda helped too. But this was definitely Ram's fight. Subaru was elsewhere fighting witch beasts with Melee and Beatrice, and Rem was still sleeping, so while their assistance was there, if it matters in the passing on of witch factors who really earned the death of the previous owner, then it was Ram all the way. But can Ram get an authority? This is where it gets interesting, and why I think there may actually be something to this theory in terms of what Tappei might be thinking. One rule we do know about witch factors is that someone cannot have both an authority and a divine protection. People with divine protections are loved by the world, and this is supposed to be basically mutually exclusive with anything witchy. Incidentally, this rule is what debunks any theories about Priscilla being the Sin Archbishop of Pride. Priscilla has the divine protection of the sun, so by this rule wouldn't be able to have an authority. There could of course be some kind of weird twist that makes it possible in her specific case, but based on the information we have at the moment, it would be impossible for Priscilla to be Pride. But why is this rule interesting in the case of Ram? Well, because originally, Ram's clairvoyance was said to be a divine protection. This would have meant Ram would not have been able to ever gain an authority, and this theory would be instantly debunked. However, Tappei later changed this, making the clairvoyance skill Ram uses a secret art that's passed down among the Oni. If clairvoyance is a learned ability connected to Ram's race rather than a divine protection, then this would mean she could have an authority as well. Of course, there are lots of reasons why Tappei may have made this change. He may have wanted to do something with it with some other Oni characters later, and so decided he wanted it to be an Oni thing rather than a blessing Ram has. He might have decided it was kind of weird for Ram, the reincarnation of the Oni god, to have clairvoyance as a divine protection. It's no doubt a useful skill, but not one particularly evocative of the raw physical brutality of the Oni god. And so maybe he just decided it didn't have the right feel as a blessing for Ram, and so made it a thing she could have learned instead. But he might also have decided that he wanted to give Ram an authority, or at least make it an option, and so to allow her to keep her clairvoyance, but not to break his own rule, he changed the nature of it, so Ram no longer canonically had a divine protection. I can also see the appeal for Tappei in giving authorities to characters within the core cast other than Subaru. It makes better use of the concept of the authorities if they're not just limited to things Subaru ends up collecting, whether he particularly wants or needs that many powers or not. And there aren't that many characters who don't have divine protections. Julius fought and beat Roy Alphard, the other Sin Archbishop of Gluttony, though he opted to capture him rather than kill him, just as Priscilla captured Sirius rather than killing her. Since both Priscilla and Julius have divine protections, Julius having the divine protection of gathering spirits, or as Google Translate calls it for some reason, the divine protection of semen, and Priscilla, as I said before, has the divine protection of the sun. Having them not kill the sin archbishops they beat manages to avoid the question of what happens to their witch factors, while still leaving it possible for Subaru to kill them later. But Ram, with no divine protection, killed her opponent. It is interesting to think about which other characters don't have divine protections, and who it might be cool to see getting witch factors. For instance, of the royal selection candidates, while Krush and Priscilla have been confirmed as having them, Felt, Anastasia and Emilia have not, but those are topics for another day. So what do you guys think? Do you like the idea of Ram getting an authority? Can you see anything that debunks this that I've missed? What do you think Ram's authority of gluttony might do? And also, how might it affect Rem if her sister, who she's connected to by synesthesia, gained a new ability? Would Rem also be able to use it under certain conditions? Let me know what crackpot ideas my crackpot ideas gave you down in the comments. That's all for this video, but thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again very soon.